Okay, today I'll be talking about Saskatchewan Indigenous subject headings. We'll be going through how it started, how we created the outreach, our engagement process, how we interpreted what we found out in engagement, and uplifting the community voices. It all started with a questionnaire. In about 2020, LibWizard was developed with members of the Saskatchewan library community to address subject heading terms. We wanted to float an idea and see if all of the libraries of Saskatchewan would be interested in working on some of them. The demand for the change of subject headings was overwhelming, and thusly we proposed where we could host all of this. It was decided that the multi-type library board host all of the things to do with the Saskatchewan Indigenous Subject Heading Project. Utilizing this board particularly allowed for a wider platform of collaboration across the sectors. So it wasn't just limited to public libraries, but also included post-secondary libraries, schools, and special libraries. Initially, we met and created a working group, but that was quickly determined that we needed to have an outreach group comprised of community members, so First Nations, Indigenous, or First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And so that needed to be held across the province. We would also need to have our Ketiak, our old ones, elders, and knowledge keepers involved as well. A facilitation group was chosen to act with us, and the advisory group advised as to how we should do everything in terms of our engagements. The advisory group was created by all the library staff from across Saskatchewan who were Indigenous that could devote some time to it. We had members from the Saskatchewan Indigenous Cultural Centre, Gabriel Dumont Institute, the University of Regina, the Peepeekisis Library System, and anyone else who was an Indigenous person in libraries was asked to participate. Prior to our engagements, which were designed with the facilitators in the outreach group, we had an opening ceremony with a traditional prayer from our Métis elder and a pipe ceremony from one of our Ketiak and Oskapios, after which we all shared a traditional meal. As you can see here, we're speaking at the opening ceremony. We held one of our engagements online, which was divided up amongst the language group, as you can see on the left side. Um, each of these online engagements was attended by an Old One elder knowledge keeper Ketiak, depending on whom was available. And we took the findings back to the technical group when we were done. Our first engagement was semi-well attended, and it did pretty good for engagement because it was held in early spring, which meant that people couldn't travel as easily, and we didn't want a lot of our community members to be on the roads, which weren't particularly friendly at that point in time. Out of that, we created a spreadsheet where we looked at all the different terms and what those terms could look like. Once we had this developed with the technical group, which again comprised of all of our sector librarians from across the reaches. Um, we took it back to our second engagement because we didn't want to just have one engagement, take the knowledge and not interact again with community. So for our second engagement, because it was held later in the year, we were able to do it in person. We did it in person in three main places with one virtual setting those who couldn't attend. And of course, we fed everybody. We rehashed those terms. We showed them what we had come up with. We made sure that the changes that we were looking at were acceptable or worked, or what they had told us initially was what we had kept throughout. Most people were really happy to see us coming back and really liked the fact that we weren't just leaving them after the first round. They loved to see the work that the technical team had interpreted from their own knowledge and liked the fact that we were keeping their knowledges in the same regard as everything else. So what we came up with, the resulting spreadsheet, as you can see here, has the initial Library of Congress term, the Canadian subject heading term, a suggested replacement or enhancement, the mark formatting for said term, and suggested usage. There is a column that got cut off, and it was why we need to make these changes. One of the many things we heard engagements was that more is always better. One of the things we're taught is that we only have 3 subject headings or maybe 5 tops within the public library community. So hearing that we should include, 8 or 9 became very interesting to hear. But what they wanted was for us to go as broad or as narrow as we possibly could to include as many people as possible. So one of the things that we looked at was the fact that Métis and Michif were both likely to be used because while Michif is a language, a lot of people we spoke with also identified themselves preferring to be called Michif. And so they wanted both Michif and Métis referenced, even if it was not the language that we were discussing, but the actual people. Most of our instructions included adding more subject headings, and so we tried to give as much of detail as we could. After this was completed and done and the engagements were done, we opened another chapter with the implementation of Saskatchewan across Saskatchewan libraries. So we held another ceremony, and our Ketayak for that one opened our implementation with a pipe and a prayer because we wanted to make sure that along the way we were following all Indigenous protocols. We, of course, had a small meal, we had soup and bannock, and we celebrated at that point. We wanted to make sure everyone came and was respected and was treated appropriately. One of the things we really learned was that everything took a lot longer than people realized. As you can see, the project was thought of and started in 2020, and here we are in 2024, and the implementation has been slow across the platforms. Our findings in the initial engagements were validated with the second round of engagements, and they were vital for the community to feel important and comfortable with us. We sought to make sure that we did everything with the community in a good way. And at times, it was way harder than it looked. But in the end, the results were much more fulfilling. The Multi-Type Library Board is committed to continuing on and will continue to add terms as they appear and are discussed. As implementation is underway, they are dedicated to the active reconciliation and realize terms are going to come to light that may have not initially been in our engagements. So one of the things that we built into the actual Indigenous subject headings for Saskatchewan is the ability to add a term or add a term for a new outreach group to look at a term for how things have evolved. Or in other ways, if you're struggling with implementation, ask a question and the technical group will get back to you. The technical group continues to meet quarterly, and when enough new terms have been approached, they will reconvene the outreach group, which will determine whether or not we need to bring in another engagement session or if it's something that is simply easy to determine through the outreach group. We also point out that this is only specifically to Saskatchewan groups. There are many subtle nuances between Saskatchewan and, say, Alberta or Saskatchewan and, say, Manitoba that come in contact with each other. So when you're looking at something, always refer back to if it's from Saskatchewan, use Saskatchewan Indigenous subject headings. But if it's from Manitoba, it would fall under the Maine or under something that Manitoba develops because Indigenous people from different regions have different responsibilities and different ways they communicate themselves. Here you can see our poster presentation that we did at the Saskatchewan Library Association conference, where we wanted to make sure our process, the need, and the lessons that we learned were documented. We wanted to make sure we were very grateful. As you can see, we thank our Ketayak, Alma Petra, Dr. Leo Omani, our old one, Irma Klein, our knowledge keeper, Marianne Pope, all the people who came along with us for this good journey. Um, and it was really informative for people to hear what we had to do, but also informative for people to see how big our team was. As you can see, the Provincial Library and Literacy Office, which offered up all the secretariat work, etc., and houses all of the documentation online for the Multi-Type Library Board, the Technical Advisory Group comprised of people across Saskatchewan, as well as the Outreach Group. So if you're trying to find all of this online and you're struggling, This is the Saskatchewan Libraries, Multi-Type Libraries Lib Guide. And if you go there, as you can see, there's the Saskatchewan Indigenous Subject Headings tab, which gives you an idea of everything. There's resources for implementation, the subject headings listing, and the contact us. If you select the resources for implementation, you'll get the Excel spreadsheet, which is divided into each of the groups across Saskatchewan. If you go into the Indigenous Subject Headings listing, it will give you some more webinars that we've done. If you go into Contact Us, that's where you can ask some of the questions. So if you have a topic or a subject heading that you would like to have looked at, you would submit it there and it would get to the group who would then put it in the queue to be discussed, and eventually you would get something back. Because it is a living and breathing Excel document, it will change with time, and we do keep track of all iterations therein. I have this handy dandy QR code if you'd like to access the Multi-Type Library Board's Lib Guide. If you would like to access the Multi-Type Library Board's Lib Guide, you can simply use this QR code. Or if you just want to go directly to the Saskatchewan Indigenous subject headings, you can do that as well by using this QR code. It'll take you directly to the tab, and then you can go from there. And I would like to say thank you to everyone for watching and listening. I have really enjoyed bringing this to you, so Kinanaskimit now, and thank you.